Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is calculate. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you're likely to hear calculate used is to mean to determine the amount or the number of something using math. So this particular verb is a little bigger or broader than just add, subtract, multiply, or divide. It's all of them together. So many times you'll see this particular verb used in the imperative when it comes to math problems. You're being told to determine the amount or the number of something in many word problems. A second way you might hear calculate used is to mean to determine by reasoning or by common sense. An example of this might be if you come home and you maybe hear a TV on, see something out on the table you don't remember, you might calculate that someone else is home. Maybe a spouse came home early from work or a child's bus was early. You are determining through reasoning that there must be someone else in your house. A third way you might hear calculate used is to mean to intend some action will have some particular effect. Sometimes you will see this particular meaning used in literature, in storytelling, to help describe maybe why a character is behaving in a certain way or why the character is saying certain things. They might calculate that their words or their actions will cause something else to happen. It's going to have this particular effect. You should know that calculate is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, all you need to do is drop the E and then add ing to form calculating. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are going to be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, calculate, ends with a T sound. So our past tense ending is going to make an id sound and add an extra syllable. It should sound like this: calculated, calculated. Now let's take a moment to look at one phrasal verb that uses calculate, and that is to calculate in. If you run into this particular phrasal verb, maybe you hear it or you see it, what it means or what it's asking you to do is to include some amount into your calculations. An example of this could be, did you calculate in the tip? So imagine being at a restaurant with some friends. You're going to split the bill. So one person looks at it and says, okay, everyone throw in $10, right? And we'll put that together to pay the bill. Well, someone might ask, did you calculate in the tip? Did you include that? Or do I need to provide a tip for our server? Now let's continue practicing using our verb of the day, calculate, in a couple different ways. We're going to focus on the simple future today, and we're going to practice with both will and be going to. These are probably our two most common ways of expressing the future, and for some students and some people, they use these rather interchangeably without thinking about it. Many people who have grown up speaking English from their birth on don't think through when to use will, when to use be going to. But it can be helpful for people who are learning it to review the rules. So let's have a brief discussion. Many times, when we're talking about the future, we're making a prediction, a guess about what is going to happen in the future. You can use will or be going to for predictions. Many times people are using will when they're basing that prediction on kind of their personal beliefs, their own ideas, opinions, or experiences. Whereas if they're making a prediction based on evidence, so other things they can observe or that have been tested, then they might use be going to. Another time we might use will to make a simple future is if we're making a quick decision. So this isn't something we've thought a lot about before we begin speaking or before we begin writing. The opposite of that is if we have given a lot of thought to something, so we're making some plans for the future, then it's more common for people to use be going to. You'll also likely hear speakers use will if they're making a promise or offering to do something for someone, or maybe the opposite if they're refusing to do a certain action in the future. Many times you'll hear be going to used for something that is just about to happen in the very near future. Okay, so now that we have an idea of when we might use will versus be going to, let's look at how we make sentences with will. So in the affirmative, all we need to do is use will and our base verb. This structure is going to be the same no matter what our subject is. An example of an affirmative simple future sentence using will would be, the software will calculate students' scores. So this sentence might be a promise. Someone is suggesting, I promise this calculation, the math will be done. You're not going to have to do it. Now, if you want to make a negative sentence with will, insert not between will and our base verb. You might hear some people combine will and not into the contraction won't. An example sentence with this would be, the school will not calculate snow days into its schedule right now. So again, this might be kind of that refusal, or maybe it's kind of connected to a promise. We are not including that as part of how long the school year is going to last, or as part of the school's schedule. If you want to ask a yes or no question using will, start with will, then you'll have your subject, then the base verb. You can see that in the example. Will you calculate how much is left on the gift card? This might be a question you ask a clerk in a store. You want to know what is left so that you can use the gift card again in the future. Now, let's take a look at some simple future sentences using be going to. The important thing to remember is that our form of be is going to be in the present tense, and it's going to change based on what our subject is. So if our subject is I, we're going to use am. If our subject is you, we, or they, we'll use are. And if our subject is he, she, or it, we'll use is. Okay, so present form of be is our first part, and then we're going to use going, to, and the base verb. Okay, so those parts will stay the same, kind of that ending. It's just the form of be that's going to change. So an example sentence could be, I'm going to calculate how long it will take for us to complete the project. Okay, so again, this is maybe something I've made a decision about. I've already started thinking about how to do the math to determine how long this particular project is going to take, and I'm now sharing that plan with a teammate or a team member. Now, if you want to make a negative simple future sentence using be going to, insert not after our be verb. An example of this could be, a simple pedometer is not going to calculate your speed. Okay, so this might be my prediction as I'm sharing that information with another person. Finally, if you want to ask a yes or no question using be going to, start with the form of be that matches your subject, and the subject is going to come next, and then follow that same sort of pattern, going, to, and the base verb. Here's another example. Our company is going to calculate their emissions output. So here we might be asking again about future plans. Are companies planning to determine or calculate how much pollution they're producing with their manufacturing or other operations? Now, let's spend just a couple minutes looking at some words that are related to our verb calculate. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. It's calculation, and it can have a couple meanings just like our verb. One meaning for this noun is a mathematical determination of the size or the number of something. An example of this meaning in a sentence could be, this problem will require several calculations. This is a sentence I know I have said many times as I have taught high school equivalency math. The math problems for the high set are sort of notorious. They're well known for having many steps and requiring many calculations. So you might need to add two things together, then subtract something else, then multiply another thing, etc. A second way to use the noun calculation is to refer to an assessment of risks, possibilities, or effects based on a particular action or a course of action. An example of this could be, he made a political calculation when he made the decision. So this is something I feel like we hear a lot of our government leaders sort of doing, particularly when they are elected officials. So in the moment, they might not always be deciding what is truly best, but thinking about, well, what are voters going to think about this particular decision? So they make a political calculation. They determine, well, if I do this, what are the possibilities? What are the risks? Versus if I do this other thing, what are the risks or the possibilities? Another related word is the noun calculator. This is something that is used for making mathematical calculations. Many cell phones now come with a calculator app, but you can also buy sort of standalone calculators, and there are many different types. Some that do more simple addition, multiplication, subtraction, division type of calculations, whereas others do really sophisticated or complex ones. An example of this noun in a sentence could be, you do not need to buy a calculator for this class. The last word we're going to look at today is the noun calculus. This is the branch of mathematics that deals with finding properties of derivatives and integrals of functions. Now, this particular definition might have just made you kind of go like, what? Derivatives, functions, right? So if that's the case, don't worry about this. It might help to know many times as we're teaching more advanced math to our high school students, you'll see people study algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and then calculus. So it's a rather complex area of math. And so one question you might have that will use this noun in a sentence would be, is calculus a required course? And for high schools, I think generally the answer is no, it is not a required course. But based on your program of study or your major in college, it may be required. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.